Hello everyone, this is MAFEX Custom in this new video about the making process of Spider-Man Unlimited in a MAFEX body made on a MAFEX bootleg. So this figure was great, it was better than a Marvel Legends of course, but it had a lot of stock articulation that I had to fix, and we'll start by scraping all the figure all after you separated all the parts. So you start cutting all the raised edges of the scope and all the scope that's raised from the surface, so you can have a more even surface. You do this with all the parts of the figure. That includes the head, the boots, or any part that has raised sculpting. For example, here the eyes, the lenses, and you do this with all the parts, as I said. Be sure not to overcut so you can have a more even surface and you don't have to apply more sculpt for it to be filled. After that, you get a towel and you start cleaning the surface of the figure with isopropyl alcohol of 91%, and be sure to give it a good cleanup because you're gonna start sculpting next. So you get sculpting epoxy. I used a 2-part epoxy to start filling all the lines in the sculpt, and I was making sure to get all the crevices in, and some of the crevices I couldn't just get filled with the epoxy sculpt after I sanded because it started to peel off. So I tried with super glue or any kind of glue that you might have there. You can use it, and you start disassembling the figure, get it in a cup, and just rinse with water, then start washing with some soap. I recommend you using dish soaps so you can get the figure more cleaner. And get all the parts on a towel and start. Then make sure to dry all the pieces that you just washed in the towel. Here I'm making the holes of the figure for the sculpt and for the frame of the cape. So here I'm trying the new cape. I made 2 holes in the back so the frame of the cape could fit, and as you can see, it's very secure, but it's not as secure as I want to. So I made 2 more holes on the back, so there's 4. Then I started drilling the holes on the parts of the sculpt, or under the parts of the sculpt. So there's a part that the sculpt is gonna hold on to, and I made them with a manual drill, but it was kind of tedious, so I started making it with an electric drill, so it was faster. But be sure not to put so much pressure onto it because you're gonna end up slicing the piece up. So be very careful. And after you made some holes on the parts of the sculpt, make sure you can put all the sculpting into the holes so it's secure. If you don't put enough of the sculpting epoxy on the holes, you're gonna end up with the sculpt peeling itself off. So I recommend you starting with the torso. Start with the middle of the spider, the abdomen or the body of the spider, and make sure you use some tools for the sculpting. after you finish with the sculpting, you start to clean it up. So you get an X-Acto knife and some sanding paper, and you start lining all the line work and all the edges of the scope. So be sure to be careful when you're using an X-Acto knife. I'm using this new blade, so it's a more crisp line. And after that, you just start sanding all the figure. Start using some sandpaper sheets. These are wet sanding sheets, so you can start wetting all the surface, and it gets more softer and more even. I recommend you using also sponges. These sanding sponges are very useful when you're trying to adapt to the surface. So make sure you get into all the articulations and all the rough parts of the sculpt, so it's a more even surface to paint. After that, you just start cleaning again the figure with a brush and a cup of water. Just start scraping all the dirt and all the particles of the epoxy sculpt that you just left when you sanded. Make sure you get into the crevices and the parts of the figure that are not as accessible, because if you get some dust in the sculpt, you're gonna end up with an insecure surface for the paint to stay. And start gathering all the parts in some sticks. These sticks have pincers on the top, so you can put all the accessories and all the pieces of the figure, and start cleaning all the figure again. But this time you're gonna get a towel and some isopropyl alcohol again, and just start cleaning all the parts of the figure that's gonna be on the more surface layer of the sculpt, and all the parts that are on the under layer of the sculpt. Just make sure you get into all the surface and all the parts that are visible mainly. Also make sure to sand the articulation well, because those parts are gonna rub off if you don't. And here I'm priming the figure. I'm using a gray primer. Gray is a very intermediate color, so it's a very versatile color for any base that you're gonna use. So I use here a black base. This is a gloss black, so I sprayed it with an airbrush all along the figure, and the small details I made them with a bright red paint with a brush. So I made sure to cover all the parts, and I made a lot of layers of red. So then I applied the highlights and covered with 3 layers of clear coat. One was a gloss clear coat, and 2 other with matte clear coat. So here I covered with the super glue on all the articulation points and all the parts that could be rubbed off when I move them. So here I'm mixing 2-part epoxy. This is a 2-part epoxy for plastics. This is a more flexible kind of epoxy, so I can apply it to the parts of the cape that I did before, and those are in the back. I'm applying it with a small this is a small stick for kebabs, and I made sure to put some super glue into the middle parts that were in between the holes, and I put some pressure onto the cape, onto the base of the cape, that is. I didn't make the process of making the cape because you can find some tutorials on YouTube, and I'm planning to do my own, so just stay tuned. And here I'm cleaning with some isopropyl alcohol and a towel. I'm cleaning the articulation points that had some masking tape. This is for when you're painting it or you're covering with a clear coat, so you can have the proper pressure in the articulation point once you put it on the ports. And I also put some glycerin onto the ports and the plugs of the figure, and also to the articulation points, so it glided more when you start moving it, so it's a smoother movement. And here's the figure made half of the assembling process, and then here's the figure once assembled. So I put a video on Instagram and in TikTok about this figure. Was a showing video of the whole figure, and as you can see, I used a cape. It's a posable cape, and here's a Peter Parker head. And here's the Cross the Spider-Verse head. This is the one from the frame where the Peter Parker are pointing at each other. So you can use it as a squinting eye head also. And this is the photo shoot of the whole figure. Thanks for watching, guys. This is Liangos Custom again, and I have my social media accounts on the links below. Be sure to subscribe, be sure to give it a like, be sure to comment what figure do you want next, and stay tuned for the tutorials. And here are some pictures of the figure with some figures that have been made, and this one from Toy Visera. Thanks for watching again, and stay tuned. Bye.